Hmm? Ah!
Okay, this is like meeting Michael Jordan or someone, I'm making sport. I don't know why I make sports.
And then we
references.
disappoint you when we open our mouths.
Most people in this space have never disappointed me.
Podcast Junkies, we are back, episode 151. We have turned the corner and are headed towards episode 200. How exciting is that? Did you catch last week's episode 150, our celebration with Pat Flynn, host of Smart Passive Income? Full show notes at podcastjunkies.com/150, and you can actually play the episode right there. Got a lot of good feedback, and I'm really excited about that opportunity to celebrate a milestone with someone like Pat, who was inspirational for me as I was getting started with this show. So I just love the way things come full circle. In case you're new to the show, we do the same thing week in, week out. We speak to amazing podcast guests like the aforementioned Pat Flynn, like this week's guest, Clay Groves. He is the host of the Fish Nerds Fishing Podcast. We connected at MAPCON, courtesy of Joe Pardo, and spent a couple of days together. Really just interesting guy. Has done a lot of things in his life and that have all led him up to this. And I think he's really found his calling with his podcast. Great personality. And we have a lot of fun and some laughs here as well. So you'll learn a little bit about Clay as well. So obviously we get into the backstory of Fish Nerds and the Fish Nerds Fishing Podcast. He talks about connecting with previous guest Amanda Doughty from episode 136. They actually did a road trip to the conference, and he talks about how they met, how he's using Patreon, and how that has greatly helped him with podcasting, advertising his ice fishing guide business on his podcast. That was an interesting conversation. He almost had a career in the music industry, interestingly enough, and it was at the time, in his own words, when Nirvana stunk. If you can think about going back that far. We touch a little bit on his daughter's acting endeavors, and that dovetails nicely into this topic of allowing your children the freedom to explore different interests. So much fun, so much good stuff. Really, these conversations really light me up every time I have the opportunity to have them. And I think you'll enjoy this one with Clay. Don't forget to tune in to the end of the episode. We've got a super magical retention hashtag just to see who's paying attention. So that happens at the end of this episode in case you're new and you don't know the rules. Enjoy. So Clay Groves, host of Fish Nerds Fishing Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on Podcast Junkies.
Yeah, let me correct you. It's Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd of the Fish Nerds Podcast.
That's a great title.
Yeah, thank you.
I made it up. When did you get the promotion? When did you get the promotion?
I killed the leader, original maker. Someone had to go.
What are day-to-day responsibilities for Chief Executive Nerd?
Pretend I have time to make a podcast and then make it.
Well, if you pretend hard enough, then you get stuff done because you're at 100 plus episodes.
174.
There you go.
Yeah. Been doing it since 2013. We started. We actually started the Fish Nerds in 2011 as a writing project, thinking we were going to get a major book deal, and turns out writing is hard, and getting a book deal is even harder. And podcasting, while hard, you get better feedback right away when you do it. So podcasting. It grew. The book project grew into a podcast, and the book never happened.
No, is that on the back burner?
It's one of those things. So let me give you a little. You want some backstory?
Sure, let's get some backstory.
All right, I'll give you some backstory. So originally I had a partner in the Fish Nerds named Dave Kellum, and he was the chief executive fish nerd. And I was the chief promotional nerd. Right? We had these made up titles, but we were equal partners. And he called me up one day in 2011. This is before we were called Fish Nerds. And he said, "Hey, Clay, I want to do something cool that no one's ever done before that we could be known for." And I said, "Cool, what do you want to do?" And he called me because I never say no to any idea. And there's not very many people around him who will do that, and he has no other friends. So he called me up and he said, "Let's do something no one's ever done before." And I said, "What do you want to do?" And he says, "I want to catch every kind of freshwater fish in New Hampshire and write about them." And I said, "That's interesting. Why don't we eat them all too?" So that was in January 2011. We launched the quest to catch them all, the quest to catch every kind of freshwater fish in New Hampshire and eat it. And we did a blog.
What's that count?
48.
48, okay.
Right, which sounds easy if you're talking about game. I don't know. Do you fish at all?
A couple times when I was a little kid.
All right.
That's about it. Yeah.
Right. Well, look, fishing is easy, and
Yeah.
anyone tells you different is lying to you. But because we were going for a species fishing, catching game fish, bass and trout and fish are easy. But of those 48 species of fish, there's dozens of tiny fish about 3 inches long that nobody knows the name of. And we had these rules. You had to catch them on a hook, so you couldn't net them out. You had to catch them legally, and you had to eat the first legal example. So we would do this whole story. We wrote for 2 magazines. In the year of the quest, we were in every news outlet in the state, including lots of television shows, front page of the biggest newspaper in the state. And we won a book pitching contest called Pitch-a-Palooza, where you pitch a 1-minute book idea in front of a crowd of 100 people or so, and they critique you American Idol style, and the winner wins an agent for their book.
Nice.
And we won. We beat NPR personalities and real writers, and we were just 2 guys talking about fish. And then that drew on for a long time. We never got a book deal, and it kept coming back. You guys are too regional. You're too New Hampshire. You're not reaching enough people, And we said, okay, well, what can we do? And we decided we didn't have time to write more and to reach out to more audiences. So we decided to create our own audience and make a podcast. And we had no idea what we were doing. I stole some headset microphones borrowed from the classroom I was teaching in. Yeah. And we just pushed record and made our first show and figured out how to get it on iTunes and sent it out in the world. And it was really funny and really terrible quality, but it was fun. And we just kept doing it over and over and over and over again. And finally, the years have gone by now, and the book the motivation to finish the book is past. We will regroup it someday, maybe, and get it out. But it's hard to go back in time when you're creatively motivated at one point to go back to that point where that creativity was, And,
well, it seems like you've rechanneled it into the podcast now.
Yeah, I totally have, and it's a lot of fun, and I get to do cool stuff. I mean, the podcast is, I have a platform where people see my name and they Google me, and because of my podcast, people take me seriously. They think I'm an expert at stuff, and
well, you are.
I made 175 podcasts, which is more than a lot of people. But I don't know if it's expert. And
well, I think it's funny. I was talking about this earlier with Annette, who's we both met at MAPCONs, and that's for the benefit of our listener or my listener. It's Joe Pardo's conference in Philadelphia, and I'm a big fan of the smaller conferences, and I think they're so intimate, and the fact that we get to connect and spend a day and a half together, and we really didn't leave the space. There was no going to external venues, and it's just so nice because you can have those sidebar conversations. And I don't know if that's been your experience because you've been going longer, I believe. No, that was the first one for you?
That was my first podcasting conference. I've been to 2 meetups in Boston with Jared Easley.
Okay.
But I was going to go to Podcast Movement and then decided I didn't want to spend the money to go out there this year. And then Amanda Doughty from Great Beer Adventure, who you've had on your show, asked me if I would do a presentation with her. Because she and I have worked really well together, and we think that we have fun, and we wanted to kind of share that with MAPCON. So we called Joe up and said, "Hey, Joe, you wanted something a little bit different," and he said, "Sure," and he has come down. So, and that's Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference for those who are Googling what MAPCON means. Yeah.
So, what was your experience? Have you been to other? You said first podcasting conference, so I imagine you've been to other types of conferences not related to podcasting.
So my background is education. I've been a science teacher for years. Right now, I currently write grants for after-school programming. To fund after-school programming in poor schools. And I go to a lot of conferences in the education space. And I can say about 80% of any workshop I sit through is a waste of my time. It's just terrible. And I've been 20 years in education, and that's been my experience with conferences in education. So this is my first conference outside of education. And I found it to be, I would say 80% of the sessions there I found to be extremely valuable. Mm-hmm. And then the ones that I didn't find as far as content value, I valued the people and the experience. So it was very different for me, and I really liked it. And I was surprised at myself because I had planned on walking out every time I got bored, and I didn't get bored.
That's
so
interesting.
Yeah, and that's why I do it for teacher conferences. Now I go into a workshop, and if it's 10 minutes in, I know if I'm going to get anything out of it, I leave.
Can you talk a little bit about the quality of the people that are there, or I know personally that the community is so accommodating, so friendly, and I'm wondering if that's something you experienced when you were there as well.
I totally felt that. I mean, look, you got a bunch of nerds in a room. I mean, real nerds. I mean, there's no nerdier space. I would challenge anyone to find a bigger bunch of nerds who are excited about like talking about ATR 2100s or excited about talking about H4Ns or comparing Podbean to Blueberry or all this jargon going around.
Yeah.
And we all speak this. We all speak that common language, even though our podcasts are all over the place. I mean, there we have podcasts. There was one called the Therapist Podcast. There was the
Whiskey Cast.
The Whiskey Cast, the Fish Nerds, your podcast. And I mean, all very, very different. But we had this common language, and I really enjoyed it. So, I mean, it was just fun. And more valuable than just sitting through the lectures, which I enjoyed, was hanging out in between those things and getting to know each other. Especially, I mean, I don't know if you were in one of the groups. I was up to like 2 a.m. the second night just talking to people about podcasting. Yeah. And that to me is gold, and really great. And there's no other opportunity like that. I mean, you go to a lot of conferences, so you can compare. But I mean, to me, that was like, wow, I need to do more of these things. I just got to figure out how to pay for them. That's the challenge.
If I remember correctly, you drove down with Amanda.
We did. We drove down together. She lives in Portland, Maine. I live in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and that's about an hour from each other. Okay. And actually, if we're both driving to New Jersey, there's a point where my highway and her highway intersect in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where there happened to be a park and ride. So we met there, left my truck there, and then we drove down in her minivan, and we recorded her podcast in her minivan on the way down, and we had a great time. She is so insanely fun.
She's so nice.
She's so nice, and I don't talk to very many people for that many hours at one time, and we just talked and laughed the whole ride down, as you can imagine.
Had you guys met previously?
We did. We actually met at a podcast meetup in Boston a couple of years before, and then I lost track of her, and then I was on one of the podcast websites, Facebook groups, and I said, "Hey, listen, I need a female to do a Valentine's episode with me. Anyone have a good voice?" And Amanda said, "I'll do it." And then we did. I did 10 Sexiest Fish or something like that as a podcast, and we talked all about fish sex for an hour, and we laughed and had a great time, and that was our romantic Valentine's special. And then excuse all those beeps. I don't know what they are.
No, I'm not hearing
Oh, good. Yeah. I am. And then she did a foodie event in Conway, and I met up with her. That's the town I live in, and I did the event with her and recorded some stuff with her, and then we just kind of have been text friends back and forth ever since.
Very cool. And
it's just easy, and it's kind of neat. And I've made a ton of friends through podcasting. Yeah. There are people all over the world who I consider my friend. I consider you my friend, and who I met through the podcast. And I even have friends who I've never seen their faces, who
that's funny.
Who contribute to the podcast, who financially and with content, but I don't know what they look like. And they just love the show, and I consider them friends. And it's going to be surprising when I go someplace and meet them in person and have to like put their voice with their face.
Are you doing that through Patreon?
Yeah, Patreon. I've got I make about $300 a month on Patreon. Nice. I've been doing that for about 3 years, for a long time. And have alternate levels of support on there, and it's been really, really great. And I don't know how I would keep podcasting without a platform like Patreon, because you can do it all yourself.
Yeah.
But like already as a podcaster, this. Suddenly I got a great content idea, but it's not good enough to have a good idea. Now you've got to be an audio engineer. Okay, so I've got to learn how to use audio software. Now I've got to be a writer because I have to learn how to blog. Now I've got to learn how to make my websites. Now I'm a website designer, and then I'm like, okay, I need to get support. Oh, shoot, now I need to come up with a platform to get money from my people, and I don't have time for all that stuff. So it's really nice to have a platform like Patreon that can have that ongoing support. And again, like I said, without that money, we'd be sinking. I don't have any sponsors because one of my big failings in life is I don't like asking
people.
What's funny, I have no problem saying, hey, do you feel like my show? Give me $1 an episode. That's easy. $4 a month is one thing, but going to a company and cold calling them and saying, hey, listen, I make this podcast. You're aware of it because you've seen us on Facebook. You want to pay me like $200 a week to talk about your fish hooks? I hate that. And so I always said I need another nerd. I need a sales nerd who can go out and do that for me. and help me. And by the way, anyone listening who wants to do that job, I'm hiring. You can be my
It seems like, I
salesman.
mean, I think all podcasters yearn to have a show that pays for itself, A, and then B, your subject matter like lends itself to thousands of sponsors. I mean, I just in terms of everything, if you can think about everything, fish, just go to a fishing store, go to open up a fishing magazine, and I'm sure there's like so many opportunities. And I have to think that if you talk to enough people, you should be able to get some sponsors for your show.
Well, it's interesting. I go to conferences. I go to a conference. I go to they're called conferences. They're expos every year, and I have a table at these big fishing expos.
Smart.
And I talk to vendors, and I talk to listeners, and my show grows a lot through that process. And I follow up with all those vendors who I speak to with a little advertising package. And what I get in the mail is piles and piles of really great fishing gear for free. But none of them, not one, has ever said, "Hey, here's some money." And even when I follow up, hey, looks like one company gave me 2 of every fishing lure in their catalog, about $2,000 worth of fishing gear. It was amazing. Wow. I was like, wow, this is great. I called them up and I said, hey, what do you want in return? And are you interested in sponsoring the show? And they said, we don't want anything in return, and we don't want to sponsor your show. And I'm like, I don't need free stuff. I like free stuff, but what I need is money to pay for the show and take my wife out for dinner once in a while. I mean, that's just really where we're at with the show right now. So, and I don't want to make it about money. I like making the content, and that's why I always say I need another nerd. I need a sales nerd who can do that piece, who doesn't mind going, hey, I need X amount of money for a 30-second spot, and then just tell me what to do. I'm not that guy. It's just not.
Yeah, well, if anyone is listening and thinks it could be a fit, is a fan of fishing and has good sales chops, I'm sure Clay would be more than willing to talk to you.
Yeah, for sure. Or if you want to just give me money, I'll take it. I'll take cash. So.
So was there an inflection point with Patreon when you saw that people were taking an interest and it could be something that could help you sustain the show?
Well, it's weird. When we first put it out there, we had about 10 fans in the first week we had it, just sign all up. And one of the things I recommend anyone doing Patreon is prime the pot. Like if you're on Patreon and you're not donating $1 a week to your own show, and we do it on a per show basis. Yeah. So that way I'm motivated to make the show. I don't want to get paid if I'm not producing, right? Yeah. So every show I put out, I'm asking for $1. But if you don't prime your pot by putting your own money in there and your own partners in the show putting money in the pot, it doesn't help others. No one wants to be the first person to drop money in a jar. I used to be a juggler and magician. And when you're performing on the streets and you put a hat out for money, you throw $5 in cash, can full of quarters and some ones in there to prime it, because it motivates people to give. They want to give to something that's winning, not to something they think, I'm not going to be the first one. No one else cares about this. Why should I care about it? So prime that pot. If you're not donating money to your own show, do it. Also, if you're asking people for supporting your show and you like other shows or on Patreon, give them money. Yeah. If you're saying, if you love this show, you're going to give me $1, and then you love a show and they're saying the same thing, you don't give them $1. It's just $1, Yeah. I know a couple of people who have small Patreon accounts and essentially funds their ability to donate to other podcasts, which is nice. Well, there's about I would say there's probably about $40 or $50 a month in my Patreon that goes right to other podcasters. Yeah.
It's just like that, just giving back into the current, this kind of like abundance mindset, and just like we all help, rising tide lifting all boats. Like if we all help each other out, I think in the long term, it's going to be a good thing.
It is. And again, attaching to what's already making money, people get excited about that. If you're like, I'm 80% to this goal, and even if that 80%, some of it's your own money or your friend's money, that's fine. People want to help you get to that goal. They like that. Yeah. But if you're 90% from your goal, like you're never going to make it. There's no point. So prime the pot a little bit and fund other podcasters. And there are other podcasts like there's a couple of other podcasts who I give money to who give me money. It's a net zero. The only people making money is Patreon at that point, but it feels like it looks good on the stats and all that stuff. I guess Patreon likes that the best.
Yeah, I opened up an account and I keep running into the Patreon folks. They're super nice. They were at a party here for LA Podfest that they sponsored, an evening event, and I was telling her how I'm just running into them more and more, and I think I need to revisit my page. And she was challenging me to get it updated. So it's something. Jonathan Oakes from Trivial Trivial Warfare has got a fantastic Patreon community, and I just keep hearing good things from people about it. And I think it's all, everyone's got their different ways of getting money. Jen Briney, a past guest, she gets physical checks, and she tells people, first, send me physical checks. Second, send me PayPal. And then last is, I think Patreon because of the fee or something like that. But she wants physical, like if you can send her a physical check, she's happy. And she actually spends 10 to 15 minutes at the end of each episode reading off like every single, this week I got a check from, this week I got this from. So, she's made it like literally part of her show. But it's nice. I think that's what they encourage, right? Involve the people who are participating in your Patreon, in your show. Absolutely.
And we have all country wars in there. By the way, all the people you mentioned, I know through my podcast. Yeah. I've met them all and I love them all. But yeah, I have Fish Nerd swag. You see that, I have the hats, I got vests, I've got hoo rags. I send stickers out to people. But it's great. And I really discourage large donors on Patreon. I don't like it because they can't sustain that.
Yeah.
So if a whole bunch of people are giving you $1 an episode, $4 a month, they can sustain $4 a month forever. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But those same people can't sustain $5 an episode or $10 an episode. And so what happens is you get a lot of a lot of ups and downs in your Patreon money. And I'd rather know I'm going to get $300 this month rather than have it change every month, unless it's going up. It can always change up. That's good. And I do have one semi-sponsor. I got a semi-sponsor through Patreon. If someone gives me $25 an episode, I'll mention their website on my show.
Okay.
And so I have one person doing that, which is great. It's not true advertisement because they didn't ask me for anything, but I guess it is.
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, I think there's always opportunities for you to be comfortable with having that slot somewhere in your show. And I tell people this when they're getting started, like do an ad read for your own product, your own book, something, your own course, like your own Amazon link, even if you only got that, your own Audible link, like something. So you have that time sort of scheduled into your episodes, and then later on you can just kind of slot bigger sponsors as they come in. But just having that mindset, if that's what you want to do, if you never want sponsors, don't do it. But if you think at some point you might, it's nice to get comfort for that. And I had an early guest, Denny Crahy. He does Diz Runs, a running show, and he did ad reads for sponsors that weren't yet sponsors, but he made them sound amazing, and he put it on SoundCloud, and he's like, okay, this is what it would sound like if you were sponsoring my show. And he used that as an opportunity to get sponsors. So, that approach works well.
Oh, that's a really good idea. I'm gonna steal that one. I like that. Yeah, I do advertise my own business on the show. My side business is I'm an ice fishing guide.
Okay.
And have you been ice fishing?
No, I haven't.
You've got to come to New Hampshire, man. I run Fish Nerd's guide service, and I only guide in the winter on the ice because the unique experience of it. I record podcasts on the ice as well while I'm out there. One time last winter, I was out there ice fishing, and it was about 10 below zero with like a 30-mile-an-hour wind, and I had all my recording equipment set up in my ice fishing shanty, but I didn't have the heat on yet, so it was really freezing cold in there. And all the plastic on my microphone stands cracked and shattered. It was so cold because they don't make this equipment for being out in terrible weather. So like everything failed. I recorded about 3 minutes, and then it was so cold my batteries all died. It was awful.
Yeah, the people that do it, the National Geographic folks, that they get gear specifically for all that sort of stuff, I imagine.
Yeah, but they're not using a $60 microphone. They're like a $600 microphone that can handle the weather. But we do it, and we have a great time. And I've wired up ice fishing shanties with one time I had 6 microphones in there and a group of ice fishermen all recording while fishing on the ice, and it's a ton of fun, and it's a really unique experience. So, but I do advertise my business on the podcast, and I do sell trips because of it, which is nice.
Very nice.
Listeners who have never done it or just want to fish with me will pay to come fish with me. The problem is I'm friendly with so many people who listen that I have trouble asking them to pay that bill. Like, hey, Clegg went to me fishing. Sure, it'll cost you X amount of money. Yeah. And then the second time they call me, I'm like, well, let's just go fishing. Just forget it.
So what is something
bad business?
What is something people wouldn't expect about ice fishing if they've never been, or something they're surprised about?
Well, what people are mostly surprised about with ice fishing is it's not. They picture either Grumpy Old Men, that movie from Maine, or they picture, it's in New England, it's very popular to go ice fishing with what's called a fishing trap. It's just a a couple of sticks on the ice with a flag, and a fish bites, the flag pops up, and the flag never pops up. So you spend all day sitting in a shanty with drinking beer, and that's what they picture as ice fishing. And so I think what they'd be surprised to see is that ice fishing is super duper high tech. Oh, yeah. So when we go ice fishing, we have every fisherman in my group has what's called a flasher. It's a sonar. So we drill a hole in the ice, we drop a transducer down through the hole, and on the screen you can see a little blip saying, okay, there's a fish where the blip is. Then you drop your bait or your hook down, and yet just another blip in the screen. You match those two blips up, and when they match, the fish bites.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a video game. So you catch a lot of fish. It's super interactive. It's fast paced. You move around a lot. And I cook everyone a nice hot meal while we're fishing. I don't care what the weather is. Could be a blizzard. We're on the ice. I'm going to fire the grill up, and I'm going to make you some beer and brats for lunch with some nice sauerkraut and spicy mustard, and you're going to cry a little bit because it warms your heart to have a hot meal while you're fishing. And if you're vegetarian, I'll cook you broccoli. I don't know what vegetarians eat, but mostly, I'll be honest, most vegetarians aren't ice fishermen either. It does.
Well, pescatarians.
Yeah, pescivores. Yeah.
Is the idea? I mean, with ice fishing, do you get that same? Is there some sustainability taken into account with that as well?
There is, but with freshwater fish, it's a whole different game. People don't generally, at least in New England, keep a lot of freshwater fish. We might eat what we're going to eat that day. I don't stack my freezer. Most people don't, and the reason is mercury, acid rain. If you look at the jet stream of the United States, New England's the tailpipe of the country. All the air from the country goes up in the jet stream and dumps out over New England, and it dumps acid rain into all of rivers and lakes.
Whoa.
So we are not recommended to eat that many freshwater fish. So we do keep some fish, but generally speaking, we're letting most fish go. We're taking photos and releasing them, and we're eating bratwurst and not fish, usually on the ice. In the ocean, though, when we fish, we do consider sustainability, and we do try to be very careful about that. But in freshwater, it's a thought, but we're not crushing the fish like that.
How thick does the ice have to be? Because that's one of the things newbies, I'm sure, get really scared about.
Yeah, so 4 inches is safe to walk on. Yeah, remember, so ice is floats, right?
Yeah.
So you're not being supported by the ice; you're being floated on top of the ice.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to hold you up. That same 4 inches without water under it would break. You'd fall through and die. Actually, less than that would hold you pretty well. But 4 inches is considered safe. And then if you want to drive a snowmobile on the ice, 6 inches.
Okay.
You want to drive a truck on the ice, 7 inches. You want to land an airplane on the ice, 12 inches or more. And we do have airports on the ice up here.
You do?
Yeah, they open up just for the wintertime on Lake Winnipesaukee. There's a big airport right on the ice, and airplanes will come in, they'll land on the ice, and people will walk out of the plane, drill a hole in the ice, and go fishing. And it's beautiful. It's so much fun. It's ridiculous. There's whole villages on the ice here in the wintertime.
So that's a whole other industry right there. Just fly in and ice fish.
Yeah, they totally do it. Now, it's a different kind of money than I have. You might have that kind of podcasting money, but I don't.
I do not.
But it's my dream to do that someday, to get on the private plane and fly into a lake someplace and just land and fish and then fly out again.
Or at least be the guide for them when they land.
Oh, see, now I like the way you think, Harry.
I mean, they're waiting. They're coming off. They're looking for someone local to the area to show them around, and you're already doing it. So why not use this as just target a different audience?
That's a really great idea, and you got to be licensed to do it. It's not anyone can do it. It's a really difficult test. You have to be an expert outdoorsman, or at least pass that test that shows you're an expert. There are plenty of great outdoorsmen who can't pass that test.
Yeah, well, just think about the example of like being a chef, or someone that can, not even a chef, someone that can cook. You can run the gamut from working in like a diner, flipping burgers, to like just a Olive Garden, or just working at a Chinese restaurant, or Wolfgang Puck's, or a private chef, or on a yacht, or on a plane, like a high-end plane or something. Just like there's the whole gamut of like where you can do what it is that you do best. And so if you are doing something, then you're really good at it. There's an audience that's going to be willing to pay to get a premium white glove version of that service, and just kind of like a done for you. Like, okay, I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it. And I want to know that I'm in good hands with you. And then you price it at a premium, and they they associate the premium price with premium service, which I'm sure is what you provide anyway. So
Sure.
for the same level of service that you're currently providing, you could probably 4x your prices and find the audience that is willing to pay that and to kind of like see where they hang out.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like when I get paid to go ice fishing, and I charge anywhere between $250 for a short trip or like $350 or $400 for a longer day. I am shocked when anyone pays it. I can't even believe someone would pay that to go fishing, but they do, and they're happy to pay it and have a great time doing it. I never had that kind of disposable income, so to me that's insane that somebody would pay that kind of money. But I mean, they're paying for me. I know where the fish live. I have all the tools. I have the equipment. I have the sonars. I have heaters. I'm trained in safety. I've got snowmobiles. I pay insurance. I buy a ton of stuff to make it the experience. But when I'm doing this, like this, I'm doing in January, I'm trying to grow my business. So I've invited all the local inn owners in the Mount Washington Valley where I live. We're a big tourist agency up here area. And I invited them all to go ice fishing for a day on the ice. So I'm setting up, I have a shanty out in the ice. I put AstroTurf out. Well, I'll be putting AstroTurf out in front of it like green grass with lawn chairs and big patio heaters up there to warm the spot. Inside the shanty will be a big screen TV with an underwater camera showing what's happening under the ice.
Wow.
And I'll be cooking, I'll be smoking ribs all day for them and have this big, because I want them to tell their customers that I exist. And so they'll come out and have the experience, and then they go home to their inns and they go, oh, while you're in town, you might want to think about going ice fishing.
Oh, yeah.
With the fish nerds.
And then and that's when you double the price.
And that's when you raise prices. That's right. When you have demand. Right now, I'm not sold out. So.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of giving people a level of service, and what they're just don't equate it with like they're paying for like the physical time. Like, oh, they're paying for an hour of my time, or they're paying for this equipment that I'm bringing out, or they're paying for the chair that they're sitting in. They're paying for the experience, and they're paying for your like IP, your intellectual property, like your experience, like trusting that you know what you're doing, that you're not going to fall through the ice, that you're going to make sure they have a good time, that they're going to be taken care of, that they don't have to worry about what equipment to buy. Like you've covered it all, and there's just something to be said for like paying and having a comfort level that you're in good hands. Yeah,
man, it's fun, and it's really it's just like everything else, like podcasting, it's a customer experience. Fishing is a customer experience. Our listeners are our customers, whether they're paying us or not. They're still our customers.
Yeah.
And so by making a fun show, an interesting show, you're serving your audience, you're serving your customers. There's no difference. Reacting to an email is customer service. Hitting a like on a Facebook post that someone takes time to put on your page, that's customer service. It's really basic and simple and valuable. So it's fun.
What can you tell us an early memorable fishing story?
I'll tell you one from a few years ago. This actually, we wrote another book last year, never published it. We keep starting books and never doing it. But I tried to crowdsource a book last November for National Novels Writers Month, and I got about 10 stories. I wanted about 40 to make the book. So I've started. I'm gonna pick it up again this November. And what I wanted was fishing adventure stories. Okay. So I'll give you the very short version of the one that I wrote for the book. So I used to work at a dam in Manchester, New Hampshire that had a fish ladder at it. Fish ladder is a way that migrating salmon and shad can cross up over top of a dam. It's like stairs for fish.
Okay.
And below dams is a known great place to fish. And I had keys to drive my car to the bottom of the fish ladder to put my boat in the water and canoe to the fishing spot.
Yeah.
My friend Tattoo Dan, and Tattoo Dan's a tattoo artist, he and I were fishing across the river, and the dam is 75 feet across, 175 feet across, and about 65 feet tall. Yeah. And it has the top 4 feet of a dam is covered in what's called flashboards. And those are boards that are designed to fall down when too much water comes through.
Okay.
And what happens is there was a huge storm about 40 miles north of us upstream. Huge rainstorm. And all that water's coming rushing down the river. Now, Dan and I are fishing below the dam. We're not in our boat anymore. The boat's tied to a tree, and we're fishing in it's called the pools below the dam. There's no water down there right now because the dam boards were up. The dam boards were there. But this wall of water is coming rushing down the river. And
unbeknownst to you?
Unbeknownst to us. Now, there is an alarm system at the dam. When the when the river's about to past a certain point, about 100 feet from the boards, big sirens blast.
Oh, man.
Get out of the water. The water's about to rise. Now 100 feet is nothing for water to move. It's gone just like that. So we're fishing. The alarm goes off. I look at Dan. He looks at me. We look up at the dam, and the boards start falling. And this wall of so suddenly, where there was no water in the river, now there's thousands of gallons coming down, and it's coming all around us. We get to high ground. We see our boat still tied to a tree, kind of flapping. His boat was on dry ground. Now the boat's floating.
Yeah.
And we look at each other, and we grab our fishing rods. We put them in our teeth, and we jumped in the rapids feet first. And one of the tricks for getting through rapids is you don't fight them, you go with them, and you go feet first on your butt, so your butt is bouncing on rocks. And we butt bounced our way down to the canoe, threw our stuff in the canoe, and managed to paddle back to the car. And this all took about 25 minutes. I told it very fast. And then we load the canoe in the car, and we're driving up to the top of the dam, and we're uphill now, and we're looking down, and we see there's helicopters flying past us. There are cops with binoculars on top of the bridge looking in the river, and there's a Zodiac boat in the river below us looking for something. So I pull up to the cop, I get out of my car, I'm dripping wet, and I say, what's going on down there? And he goes, a couple of guys were fishing down there, and the flashboards gave, and someone called 911, and we're trying to find them. And I said, that's weird. I was just down there fishing. I didn't see anybody. And then we left.
That's funny.
So, yeah, true.
Is that instinctual at that point when the idea to jump in? I don't know that everyone would have that thought that let me jump into the rapids. Is that something you're taught?
No. Well, if you're raised in rivers, like my kids spend all summer in rivers, playing in rivers, playing in rapids, jumping in. And I taught them that. I don't recall learning it. And they won't recall learning it when they're adults either. It's just part of our culture. Just like if you live in a city, you know how to navigate the urban environment and do what you do in a city. If you live in the mountains and rivers, you know how to navigate your environment. And, it just so happens that we know how to navigate rivers because that's what we spend all of our time doing. It's not a big deal. Both my kids would be fine in that scenario. And my kids are 7 and 10.
And the only option you had at that point was to jump into the rapids, or it just would have gotten too high?
Yeah, you couldn't walk across. You couldn't swim across. The only way was downstream or climbing one of those. There's like little islands. You could climb a tree and wait for rescue. But we didn't feel. I was in my mid-20s. Yeah. And it's your most dangerous time as a guy to be alive when you're 24 years old. We didn't feel like we were in any real danger, so we just saw it as there's the boat. Here we are. How do we get there? Let's go. Yeah. That was it. And it was no big deal. And we never panicked or worried or got in any kind of trouble.
Very cool.
And and that was it. But it was really kind of fun to give the cop a hard time.
And you must have felt very special having all these people searching for you.
It's really great that people do respond like that when people need help. It got me thinking about all these tragedies we have in the world. And you think about like I don't get dark for a second, but you think about like when bad things happen in Orlando, the shooting in Orlando a couple of years ago, they had Orlando Strong, right? And the Vegas shooting and all these other things. And they always are so like, what's really amazing is that people showed up and helped and heroes appeared. And I find that not remarkable at all. I find that to be normal for people. People are normally good and normally heroic and normally great to each other. And somehow whenever bad things happen and people show up and help, we're surprised by that when we really should be surprised at the opposite. I'm surprised when people don't help because most people are good, most people are heroic, most people are helpful, and most people are kind. And I think that we forget that sometimes. And that's why we write Vegas Strong. But really it's human strong. It's people are good, largely good everywhere in the world and largely want to help each other everywhere in the world. That's the truth about most humans. And we forget that. And that's so I wasn't surprised. I'm excited that people do that. Not surprised. I'm glad people are who they are, and people are largely good. So
it's just affirming in the power of like inherent human nature. It is to do good things, and just highlights the fact that all the people, the small, minuscule minority that's doing really crappy things, is really outweighed. And I had that feeling in 9/11. Like after that. It was the first time I felt New York City like a small town. It was just you just walk in the street, and were
you living in New York at the time?
I was, and I used to work like 5 blocks away from it. So I literally saw everything happening from the roof of my building live. It was just very surreal. But just the way the just that neighborhood came together, the whole city came together. And unfortunately, we need moments like that for that to become aware of it. But it's there, and it's nice to know that it's there. To your point,
it's always there,
Yeah.
and that's why we're always touched by it, because
Yep.
it reminds us that it's always there. We're not special because we were in New York when something bad happened, and violence worldwide is down, and it has been since the 1990s. It's never been a better time to be alive and be safe anywhere in the world than it is right now. But we don't feel that because of the media and stuff. So that's why we need to fish more and talk about fish more, because it never gets scary like that.
What got you into teaching?
I was in music for a bunch of years. I was working in music stores for a while, and the store I was working for went out of business. And
Was it Sam Goody?
No, it was Strawberries. It was related. It was Strawberries Music Store in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, which was owned originally started by the mafia, believe it or not. We didn't know that until after, but I didn't know that until after. A lot of people probably knew that already.
Yeah.
But they went out of business. It was in the mid '90s when music stores were just closing down. Technology was changing, and so I lost that job, and then I joined AmeriCorps, which is a national service organization. And I did 2 years of national service, believe it or not, having no teaching experience. And they put me in science programming, and they put me in fisheries programming. And I learned to be a fish nerd, and I learned to teach at the same time. So I started learning everything about fish and how to teach at the same time. And from there, I said, I'm going to be a teacher. I went to college and did all the stuff I was supposed to do. And of course, now I'm not teaching now. Now I'm grant writing, which is less fun. It helps more people, but it's way less fun,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just kind of what was next. I had nothing going on. I thought I knew my career was going to be in music, and I was hoping to work my way up from managing stores into at the time, some of the big record companies would hire their reps out of stores. And I was hoping to work for Warner Brothers or Atlantic Records or something, and I was close. And then everything fell apart, and I went, all right, what's next? And moved on.
So let's tease that story out. Let's tease that story out a little bit, because I imagine as we go further and further back with your career, I get the sense that the stories just keep getting more and more interesting.
There's so many stories. It never ends.
What's the music about? What's that background, and where's the interest come from?
Oh, I was just a big punk rock fan I went to high school in New Jersey. I lived in Manhattan as a kid, and so 80s rap I was way into in the 80s. I lived in Manhattan. I went to junior high school on 14th Street, lived in Governor's Island and the Coast Guard base.
Oh, nice.
And so I live in the mountains now, and I'm a mountain person, but I'm just as much a city person. I was in the streets of New York in the 80s. I mean, that's urban.
Did you watch the Get Down on Netflix?
I have not watched the Get Down.
It'll be a trip down memory lane. The first season is better than the second one, but just the music, like Africa Bambaataa and the Bronx in the 70s, bringing the hip hop and the disco and the matching and all of it, like Run DMC and just the birth of hip hop. That was for me. That's me. I grew up DJing. I mean, I've got my turntables still in the background here, and I grew up listening to vinyl records, and it was just a magical time.
Yeah, so I went from all that kind of musical, just in my cultural life, my daily life. In the 90s, in the 80s, got into punks. When I moved to New Jersey, I got into punk music. Really big fan of all the old 80s punk stuff. And then in 1991, I moved to England and went to the Reading Festival. That was where Nirvana broke big, and Blur, and Ned's Atomic Dustbin. By the way, Nirvana was awful. Awful. The worst band I've ever seen at that point in my life.
Really?
And I got back to the United States afterwards, and they were the biggest thing. I'm like, what is it? They were terrible. And I couldn't like them because I was so pissed at how bad they were. They were terrible. And then the Brit pop band Blur played after them and blew them off the stage. Mm-hmm. And then I got back to the United States, and they're huge. I'm like, nope. And I refused to like them. Now, 20 years later, I'm like, yeah, they're awesome. I love them. Now
appreciate them.
Yeah, I appreciate them now. So, but yeah, so there's no real reason. It just happened to be what was next. I moved to New Hampshire, and I didn't have a job, and they were hiring, and I applied for a job. I actually worked there 30, 40 hours a week, and I worked at Taco Bell another 20 or 30 hours a week in the 90s. So when you're in your 20s, you can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Work a ton. And now I'm old. I don't have patience for that anymore.
So what do you play? What instruments?
Nothing. I just sold music. I have no talent at all. The only talent I have, and it's just barely talent, is I talk a lot. Yeah. And that's barely counts as talent, And Yeah, I wish. I own a guitar. I've owned it for about. My wife bought it for me as a college graduation present.
Okay.
And she said, "What do you want for college graduation?" Because I didn't go to college until I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
And I said, "I want a guitar and lessons." And she went, "Okay," and bought me a guitar. And so I still have it. It just sits on a shelf or on a stand, and it looks really pretty in the living room. And once in a while, friends will come over and noodle on it, and I'm like, man, I wish I could make noise out of that thing. Because I have all the books and CDs and all the stuff. I don't have his knowledge. Like, I need help with some things.
You should. It sounds like another podcast you can start.
I know how to play guitar with clay.
Yeah, how to learning the guitar, one chord at a time. You just go through, and every episode, just like, okay, let's figure this out. And that'll be your podcast episode / jam session / guitar lesson.
I can't think of a worse podcast. I just think terrible.
There's been stranger ones started, I'm sure.
But you never know. There may be someone who want to learn with me.
Yeah.
And at any point. So once there's like 100 episodes out, they might start the first one.
Imagine if at the end of 100, like you're jamming on the guitar and you're like, guys, this is possible. Go listen to episode 1. I literally did not even know like how to like whatever string a guitar or whatever it is you need to learn. So
so now I need to find a way to make money podcasting because who's got time for more? One podcast takes up so much time. I can't imagine. I know people who do multiple podcasts. I'm like, that seems impossible unless you have like no friends, no family, and no job.
Yeah.
Like who has time?
You mentioned you're juggler as well.
I am. Yeah.
So is it just you get attracted like jack of all trades, or you just kind of learning a little bit of something, or because Da Vinci had that as well.
He was a juggler?
No, he just learned. He had he used to do all these things like woodworking, sculpting, painting, like gardening. I don't know. You find out that as amazing as he was as a painter, it's because he had all these other things, and I think that helped colored his experience.
Yeah, well, I think ADHD wasn't invented when I was a kid. So what I do is my problem is I'm impulsive, and I'm impulsive and I'm stubborn. So like when people say, "Hey, Clay, you want to try something?" I always say, "Yeah, let's give it a go." Like right now, I'm processing how to make a guitar podcast because you wrecked my day, and so I have a really hard time saying no to any concept or any idea. Yeah. So I always try stuff. I did beekeeping last year for a year.
Beekeeping.
Someone gave me beekeeping gear, and they gave me all the stuff, and I went, all right, I'm going to be a beekeeper this year. And I had before that day, I had never thought about being a beekeeper.
There's a beekeeping podcast, by the way, in case you're wondering, and he's actually reached out to me. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's good. It's a very good podcast. It does its job. But yeah, I listened to that podcast. I did live streaming of every beekeeping adventure I had. From the very first day, I did a live stream on Facebook of my bees, and people loved it. And I never got stung, and they all died at the end and flew away. I never got any honey, and it cost me hundreds of dollars to be a beekeeper, and I gave it up because I couldn't afford to keep going. I would have.
But you tried
because it's fascinating. Yeah, I tried it. I was a beekeeper. Yeah.
What else have you tried?
Oh God, I don't know. It's a good question. Because it kind of comes as it goes, and I don't think about all this stuff. But yeah, I was a juggler. I was a magician. I was a beekeeper. I've been a teacher. I've been a science trainer, citizen scientist. I've had every kind of job, from being a chef to being a janitor, and even my current job, where I'm a grant writer. I never wrote a grant until I got this job, and then my first grant I wrote was for a $300,000 5-year after-school programming grant, and I got it.
Nice.
So now I'm a grant writer, which I've never done, not trained for, and you just kind of you nerd out on all like. And one of the things I always say to people, like they say, "Why fish nerds?" And I always say, like, everyone's nerdy about something.
Yeah.
And like in the 80s, being a nerd was, you wore the glasses with the tape in the middle, and people made fun of you. But now nerd is like a chic thing. It's a cool thing, and I always say, pick your thing. And whatever it is, go nuts with it. Be nerdy about it. If you're a sports person, if you're way into sports stats, which I don't understand at all, believe it or not, you're a nerd. There's nothing nerdier than someone memorizing a bunch of stats.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the definition of
the fantasy
nerd.
Football folks. The fantasy baseball, I don't get that at all.
Those guys beat me in the podcast awards. Like, I can't compete. Like the Fish Nerds podcast gets mixed in with these real sports awards category. You can't win against fantasy football. But I always say, whatever you're nerdy about, that's what it is. I happen to, in the last few years, be really into fish. That could go away in a couple of years. I might be, 5 years before that, I was a big organic gardener. I was way into organic gardening. So it's whatever your thing is at the time. And now I have like multiple things, but I have kids now, right? I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. And my 7-year-old's into acting now. So she's trying out for all the plays. So last year, she tried out for a professional play at a local theater here, professional theater. And she said, "Dad, will you come with me?" I'm not an actor. I'm not trained in anything. I can't sing. I can't dance. And I did the reading with her. And they offered. I didn't want a part, but they offered us both speaking parts in the play. I was the minister in the play, and it's funny as an atheist. It's a really funny role for me. So I'm like, sure, let's do it. So the two of us act in that play. Tonight, she and I are trying out for Christmas Carol, and she's been in about 6 professional plays since then. Nice. And my job as a dad is to encourage my kids' nerdiness. I want them to be as nerdy as they want to be.
Yeah.
And I don't force them. They do all the things. But they think, so here's a funny thing about my kids. They're surprised when families sit home together and watch TV. They find that to be such a bizarre thing. Like we went to the doctor's and my 10-year-old's getting her checkup. And the doctor says, "Hey, so no more than 3 hours of TV per day." And she said, What do you mean? And he goes, "Well, you can't watch more than 3 hours of TV per day." And she goes, is that a thing people do? I don't understand what you're talking about. Because we have TV, but we turn it on Saturday morning for an hour. I mean, it really is. I like to watch TV at night when the kids are in bed, but it's not part of our family culture because we're so busy with so many things. And she's surprised that dads don't all have their nerdy hobbies. Because I have a podcast. My friend is a drummer in a leftist marching band, which they show up at political events and they just play over. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But so my friends are all nerds too. And so my kids are very surprised at the normal American dad as opposed to like the nerdy people like us who do things and create things. And I think that's good for our kids to see that and for them to embrace their inner nerd and be who they are. And it's really fun. And working in the school with kids now, you're seeing that more and more because I'm seeing 10-year-olds with YouTube channels. Yeah. Who are making money playing video games. Yeah. Like, it's insane. They called me Nintendo No Friendo when I was in high school because I played Nintendo until my thumbs were bloody. But now kids are doing it and getting paid for it because of their YouTube channel. It's insane. So kids are doing it and they're being, and believe it or not, that's a creative endeavor. It's still making art. You're making a visual thing for someone else to ingest. Whether I get it or not doesn't matter. But to a kid, that's creating something. They're doing a thing and producing content for the world to see. That's artist. You make a podcast, that makes you an artist. No matter what else you're doing, you're creating something for people to consume for entertainment. That's art. And so my kids are surprised when people aren't artistic in some way, aren't creating something in some way. And I like that surprises them. I think that makes, as a dad, one of the few things I'm doing right is I'm winning in that area. My kids want people to be creative and are excited by creative endeavors. So I
think that's awesome, Clay. I think that so many parents could learn from that approach because I think they get overwhelmed with what it is, how to raise a child perfectly in this environment. There is no perfect way, but I think to the extent
I can write the book.
like you need another book assignment, right? Right. But I think just this idea of letting them go and explore and find, letting them try a couple of different instruments. Maybe they don't take to one, maybe they take to none, maybe they take to all or something. Like letting them work it out because there's a period in their life, and they said that first 1 through 7 is when a child's mind is literally like imaginary friends.
Screwed up.
But just at any age, just like encourage the magic in life and to have them chase the magic in life and just say, look, there's no wrong answer. There's no wrong thing to do. There's no wrong hobby. Like if it lights you up and because you know how they are, they'll have something that'll be hot for them for like 3 months and it'll be like, on to the next one. And you live through that yourself, I think. So that's why you're more open to allowing them to have those experiences.
Yeah, it's funny. It frustrates my mother-in-law a little bit because the kids will start things and quit them all the time, and I'm like, "There's nothing wrong with it. That's how we learn. Yeah. If it sticks, it's the right thing. If they quit early. Quit when you hate it. Yeah. Don't quit. Don't stick it through it because you want to be a tough guy. Just do the stuff. So.
Or because your mom is sending you to piano lessons every Sunday morning. All your
friends I mean, there is a certain amount of the kids have to do the thing because they my kids have to be good in school.
Yeah.
Like. Suck it up. You don't get to not like school. Everyone likes school. I tell them that's you're not allowed not to like it.
Very cool.
But if in their hobby activities, if they don't like gymnastics, don't do gymnastics. My 10-year-old loves like karate. She does karate. I can't, in a million years did I ever think I'd be spending my Friday nights going to karate matches. It's so to me uninteresting to me. But she doesn't know that.
Yeah.
She won't I won't play this for her. I could give I don't care. I just why?
But that's her nerd. That's her.
She loves it.
Yeah.
She loves every minute, and it's organized and disciplined, and it matches her brain. And I'm not organized and disciplined, so
yeah. There's good. I took martial arts for 3 years, and there's something about the discipline and the respect for the place where you're coming to learn and the teacher, and those are important lessons, I think, and everyone gets them from different areas, and a lot of people do get that discipline that they do bring into the rest of their lives from martial arts.
Yeah, so good for them. Yeah, so that's. I don't know if I answered the question or if we were just talking. I have no idea where we're at.
Just a couple more questions as we wrap up.
Yeah, sure.
What's something you've changed your mind about recently?
That's a really good question. I change my mind so often. I've been actually, believe it or not, the last couple of years, because of conflicts on Facebook, I've been practicing being wrong.
Okay.
I've been making it a point to notice when I'm wrong as fast as I can, and to step back and say, you know what, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's where I've been at in my own personal development, is practicing being wrong, and even accepting being called wrong when I know I'm right. Because deciding, does that fight matter or not? Mm-hmm. And the old saying, you can be right or you can be happy. And I'm choosing my battles differently, and I'm also willing to explore me being wrong, even when I really think I'm right. And so I try harder to listen to people and to hear what they're saying and understand where they're coming from before I get defensive on being right or being wrong. So I'm wrong a lot more than I ever was. My wife is telling me I'm wrong too often these days, but I'm.
It almost sounds like a compliment.
I know. I'm like, well, it's a lot of people are never wrong, and so, but I don't argue anymore with people. I listen and I go, boy, I hear your point, and I think you might be right.
Yeah.
And I say, so I agree with them, and then I might add something to them to carry that conversation forward, as opposed to saying wrong, and going against them.
Yeah, because you shut down the conversation at that point.
Mm-hmm. And you're not hearing them. You're busy formulating your own argument against what they're all saying. You're planning what you're going to say next.
Yeah.
And when you're wrong, especially in a power situation, like if I'm talking to one of my supervisors, and they're going on and on about mistake I might have made, and if I stop and say, you know what, I hear you, and I was totally wrong about that when I made a mistake. How do we fix it and go forward? Mm-hmm. The conversation about how wrong I was ends. And now we're talking about productivity again. We can get things done. And way more valuable for me to be wrong than right. Unless it's trivia night. Last night at the bar, we did trivia night, and I did not like being wrong then. I hated that.
Well, it's interesting, Clay, because you have to really swallow your pride, and you have to not let your ego control the situation and feel the need to be right. And that comes with age. I mean, I've realized those lessons the hard way, and I'm still realizing them.
We all do.
And I think it's so funny because sometimes you wish you could give these lessons to people that are younger than you, and so they wouldn't have to go through them. But I think we have to go through them. And I think
we have to. Well, it's right in school. They're trying to teach kids empathy, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like my wife's a kindergarten teacher, and she's like, "How do we teach empathy?" I'm like, "You don't teach empathy. Empathy is an experiential thing. We learn to be empathetic because we make fun of a kid, and the kid cries, and then we feel bad. Yep. That bad feeling we get when we did that one thing wrong, that's empathy, and you cannot teach that. Like, you have to make the mistake to learn it. I think with being wrong and with my brain space these days it's where I am at in life. And so I can't tell someone to practice being wrong. They have to come to that point and do it on their own. Mm-hmm. It's the same as learning empathy. You can't teach it. You got to just either do it or don't do it, and either have it or don't, I guess. Yeah.
What's the one most misunderstood thing about you?
People think that I am always happy all the time.
Okay.
And I think that that's true. I would say 90% of the time, even in really sad situations, I'm usually the first one to make a joke at a funeral. My mom died last summer, and at the funeral, I was making jokes. It's how I cope with real life. Yeah. That's my mechanism. But they think I'm always the happiest person in the room. And there's one more bigger thing is I am socially shy. I have this is true. People think that I'm good at mingling in a room full of people, and this is bigger than the other one, and I hate it. Yeah. I hate it. I love public speaking. Like, I got hired to speak at the Virginia Aquarium this year and flown down to Virginia Beach as keynote speaker. No problem at all. No, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't shy. Room full of a couple hundred people. No problem at all. Afterwards, at the meet and greet, I didn't know what to do with myself. I wanted to run and hide. I hated. I had to force myself to do that. So I'm bad at that kind of one-on-one interaction. This is okay because there's a computer between us.
And podcasting conferences, obviously, you're good because I saw you walking around with the mic there.
Yeah, well, that's again. It's so the microphone is like a shield, right? It puts something between us, and it allows me to get in, and it's an icebreaker. Mm-hmm. So I have a thing in my hand, and it helps me. But even that, like if you are ever at a place where other podcasters aren't, and you're doing that same thing, it is really difficult. For if you're at a big ice fishing competition, and there are hundreds of grumpy old ice fishermen on the ice, and you walk up to a group of people drinking, cans of Schlitz or whatever, there's piled on the ice next to them, all these dead fish, and you stick a microphone in their face, is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Luckily, I've been doing it long enough in New Hampshire, and I sponsor all the ice fishing pages on the internet. There's like a lot of listservs. I sponsor those. Okay. That's my podcasting sponsorship. That's why I pay my money to grow the show. Mm-hmm. They all know my brand. Nice. So I say, fish nerds, oh, I saw you on the internet. I'm like, okay, good. Now, tell me about why you don't like hanging out with your wife for whatever reason you're on the ice for. The classic answer of why do people ice fish is it gets away from their wife. It's the most classic old fisherman joke there is.
I'm so tempted to already title this episode "Breaking Ice," both literally and figuratively.
Do it.
Well, Clay, thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Sure.
I'm really glad we got to meet. And it's one of those things like in the podcasting world, you sort of have heard of the person, or we've got mutual friends in common. And so it just sometimes takes a day or two together to really like get to know each other and realize that the conversation is probably long overdue. And I'm glad we were able to make it happen.
Yeah, for sure. I first heard of you, gosh, must have been 2 years ago. Liz Covart, friend of mine, was wearing a T-shirt. One of your T-shirts, I asked her about it, and she told me about it. So, and then from there, kind of like been following you on Facebook for years, and then I saw you at the podcasting conference. And it's the whole thing weirdest for me is I see people like you and Dave Jackson and a few other people, and I get nervous when I first see you because you guys are like, in my eyes, like superstars in the space. Like I know your stuff from the internet for so long that I feel like, okay, this is like meeting Michael Jordan or someone, I'm making sport. I don't know why I make sports.
And then we disappoint you when we open our mouths.
most people in this space have never disappointed me.
Yeah, that's so great.
Yeah, most people have been very generous with time and experience, and that's what I'm trying to do now. Is a bunch of other fishing podcasts that come on the internet recently, and I've reached out to every one of them and offered them support.
Nice.
And I help them get their audio right and help them kind of get things moving and get them on my show and help share their stuff and get more of them. We need more good podcasts, not more podcasts.
Yeah, we need more people like you, ambassadors for podcasting in the space as well.
Yeah, it's totally fun. So
where's the best place for folks to track you down?
Fish nerds everywhere. Fishnerds.com, fish nerds on the internet. It's fish nerds. That's it. It's not hard. Fish Nerd Nation on Instagram, I think, because someone else has Fish Nerds. But once I own the trademark, I will get it back.
I'll get that back. Well,
I'm working on that.
Thanks again, Clay. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Hey, thanks, Harry.
So thanks again to Clay for coming on the show and sharing his story. No matter how they make their way to me, I'm always internally grateful for the guest and spending that much time, spending an hour of their time with me to spread the podcasting gospel. So many different podcast hosts doing amazing things with their show, and Clay and his Fish Nerds podcast is just another example of that. We are a proud member of Podcastica.com. Intro and outro music composed by, say it with me, Cedar and Soil. CedarSoil.com for his list of amazing music. Next week, we have an interesting conversation with David Ridgen. He is an award-winning independent Canadian filmmaker turned podcast host. And his show is Someone Knows Something, and it's part of this new wave of true crime. And he's got an interesting take on it because, like I mentioned, he started as a filmmaker, so he's putting a ton of research. And it actually changed my opinion of these types of shows. I wasn't that much of a fan, but when you get to speak to someone who takes their craft super seriously, like David does, it makes for a really interesting conversation. So that's next week. If you made it this far, if I can get the words out of my mouth, the retention hashtag is going to be FishNerdClay, FishNerdClay hashtag, and tag him at FishNerds, FISHNERDS, and we are at Podcast_Junkies. If you want to do something to support the show, then I think an iTunes review would be good if you haven't done that already. If I keep asking you and you haven't done it and you're like, oh man, Harry keeps asking me, I should do it, then today's the day. But if you're just new to the show, then make sure you download our free PDF of the 8 tools I've used to launch Podcast Junkies at podcastjunkies.com/8tools. And you'll also be updated with every time we have a new episode, so you don't miss a thing. Take care, guys. Talk to you next week.